Only around 150 people have died in Libya. That is the opinion of Muammar Gaddafi, who has spoken exclusively to France 24. He said there'd been small Libyan army units battling the forces of Al-Qaeda, and that was all, and that the world was being shown a distorted view by international television channels. Shortly, we'll bring you that interview in full here on France 24. On the ground, claims, counterclaims and a lot more violence. Battles have raged all weekend at key points across Libya as pro- and anti-Gaddafi fighters have turned more desperate for victory. Helicopter gunships, tanks and heavy weaponry have been used in a significant escalation in fighting. Hello to you, this is live from Paris. I'm Stuart Norval on France 24. Only around 150 people have died as small Libyan army units battle the units of Al-Qaeda. That appears to be the view of the Libyan leader Muammar Gaddafi as he spoke exclusively to France 24.
On both sides, the army and police on one, the insurgents on the other, only 150 to 200 people were killed. But it's claimed there were thousands.
Well, it was a full interview done by France 24's Arabic service. He went on to say that Western media is distorting what is actually happening on the ground. And he also said that France's suggestion that it would recognise a transitional council was ridiculous and he would not intervene in, for example, Corsican issues. Well, let's listen to the rest of that interview in full now.
Welcome. This is a new interview by France 24 in Tripoli, the capital Libyan, of Muammar Gaddafi, the head of the Libyan revolution. Thank you for accepting to receive us here in Tripoli. And I'd like to start off with the following question. What is the current state of affairs in Libya? Look at the Green Square. The population is there. They've gathered in huge numbers. They're there to defend the 1st of September revolution. You can see that. And therefore, a huge number of people have gathered around the 1st of September revolution to defend it. But there are odd things happening in Libya. Nobody knows what's happening inside Libya. So you've got events there. You hear about it outside our country. But this is very odd, really. In fact, in your previous writings and statements, you said that there were foreign media, foreign TV channels that were interfering. Why have they got an interest in doing that? We can't say what exactly is their interest, but obviously there is a plot that is deliberately distorting the truth. We are telling them what you are broadcasting or publishing is not the truth. And what is happening inside Libya is not what you're showing to the outside world. There has been manipulation. The truth has been manipulated. Have a look at the Green Square. A lot is happening there. And that has to be reflected outside our country. So what's the objective here? And whose interest can such a plot be? Libya has very good relations with the United States, with the European Union, with African countries. And Libya plays a crucial role in regional and world peace. When tensions explode in Sudan, in Darfur, or in Mali, or elsewhere in Africa, we step in.
You founded the African Union in 1979. Where are the African leaders today, at a time when Libya is experiencing a terrible crisis?
We are in the middle of a crisis, but so are the others. Africans are in constant contact with me, and I'm telling them things should not be blown out of proportion as if there was a major problem. In fact, the African Union has sent an investigation committee to show that what is being said about Libya abroad is 100% false. This is all very odd. It's very strange. We had a good relationship. Maybe there is a problem in terms of security in the Mediterranean, in terms of blocking immigration. There are millions of black Africans who could immigrate via the Mediterranean and head for Italy or France, and Libya plays a crucial role in the Mediterranean in terms of stopping that. We also have major oil companies, be they Spanish or French, and all these companies are working in the oil sector, and suddenly
What has changed,
forgotten what
therefore?
their real interest was. In reality, this issue of imperialism is not really something I believe in here, but we need to look closely at what's happening. Look at how Berlusconi is reacting, how Spain is reacting. The image that has been conveyed of Libya, drawing on people who belong to Al-Qaeda and their statements. They're the ones who published all these lies about what's happening in Libya. And we didn't believe this would be broadcast throughout the world. They have magnified, I'm talking about these Al-Qaeda people, they've magnified all this false information. Al-Qaeda's its own plan. We weren't paying attention to all of this initially, and I believe Al-Qaeda tried to take advantage of the situation in Tunisia and in Egypt, and have now fallen back on Libya. For instance, look at what happened in Benghazi.
Do you have any information about these cells or units?
Weapon cells that were activated, took up weapons to kill policemen, kill soldiers. Casualties on both sides for 2 or 3 days, and weapons were stolen. Now, on both sides, the army and the police, then on the other side, the rebels. There have been at the most 100 people killed.
So, about 6,000 people have reportedly been killed.
People should come and see, hear how many people have been killed. They can come and check among the population and among the police and the army. Some people have been killed, Some policemen have been killed, as well as some soldiers and some civilians. People were killed in the street, not just in attacks on police stations. And the world has been given a totally unreasonable presentation of what had happened. Because it's a small village in the Sahara Desert. And there was talk of bombing and shelling of this hamlet. A few over 1,000 people who lived there. Now, the secretary of the People's Conference, supposedly was killed. But, he's here, in Tripoli. As it was also claimed that 3,000 people live in that village. It's just a small oasis with not more than 1,000 inhabitants. So I'd like to say to all my friends throughout the world that a distortion has been made out of these peaceful demonstrations. There's talk of hundreds of people being killed. The world was misled into believing this. But you have press correspondents here in Libya, and they
he
should
took
be able to
advantage
say
of the
what's
situation to say that Gaddafi doesn't respect the freedom of the press.
No. We are sensitive because of our history and colonialism. So, the goals of imperialism are something we know well. We were colonized by the Italians. And journalists come from these countries, well, from this country, Italy, and the conclusion was drawn that we didn't want foreign journalists or reporters. Some of them work for Israel, some for the United States. Unfortunately, all of this is happening in the absence of representatives of the good press agencies. We've opened our doors wide to the international press. We're asking the entire world to open up its eyes and then to be able to talk from an image of what's really happening. Previously, there was a distortion. There was a Security Council resolution voted against Libya. But it did not take into account Al-Qaeda. We are partners in the war on terror. And we tried to fight terrorism, and now they are fighting us.
The next question is, the Western countries say that Al-Qaeda is beginning to be much more active in Libya, and therefore the European Union and the West may intervene in this situation.
Well, of course. There are armed extremists in Algeria. Also, there are armed extremists who have been fighting in Algeria, just like in Iraq and Pakistan. There are fundamental radical Islamists. Even the Israelis in Gaza, when they moved into the Gaza Strip, they moved into the Gaza Strip with their tanks to fight such extremists. It's the same thing here. We have small armed groups who are fighting us. We do not use force from the outset. There were attacks, and the world now sees that we are mired in such a terrible situation. So the Security Council voted a resolution. So the world is bogged down in uncertainty. A stance was taken, and then it was said, but not clearly, that a mistake had been made. Armed units of the Libyan army have had to fight small armed Al-Qaeda bands. That's what's happened. And later, there were members of Al-Qaeda who were fighting there. There you are. Some of them had their ammunition
France
belts.
has said that it is prepared to recognize the representative council representing eastern Libya in Benghazi. What do you think of this?
That's ridiculous. Interfering in the domestic affairs of a country. I mean, if we were to interfere in terms of what's happening in Corsica or Sardinia, how would they react? The north of Italy used to be independent and called Britannia, and we have not interfered. Now, look at Benghazi. Those armed terrorists in Benghazi, including members of Al-Qaeda, did not have clear political demands, as was the case in other North African countries. Al-Qaeda is just pure radical fundamentalism. They don't have any links with the Revolutionary Council of Benghazi. There are traitors. And, for instance, the Al-Qaeda people do not take into account the National Revolutionary Council or the Constitution.
So some dissidents have resigned, have they?
Well, there were people who were in the embassies and believed what they were told and made that mistake. In Benghazi, there were officers and civilians, but there were also terrorists.
One last question. We have heard a declaration by President Chavez of Venezuela. He has proposed to act as an intermediary with the people of Benghazi. What do you think of this proposal?
But there's no problem there.
This intermediation doesn't exist for the moment, does it?
In the revolution of the 1st of September in Libya, I mean, we need to get rid of these armed gangs. There are traitors who want to further their own interests. But the terrorists...
How are you going to deal with these people?
The people is going to deal with them in some zones. The population in some areas has reacted to the fact that terrorists had stolen submachine guns, and the population reacted. And in some areas, the population was able to encircle and block these terrorists, these people who've taken up arms. Some of them were arrested, and the population was able to disarm them.
Muammar Gaddafi there speaking to France 24's Arabic team. Well, Douglas Herbert from our International Affairs Desk joins me now. Douglas, many people watching that interview, having seen all the pictures we've seen over the last few days, are going to be saying to themselves, how on earth can he say only 150 people have died?
Well, we're getting used to the narrative line of Gaddafi being in denial, and what this interview essentially does, all 19 minutes of it, if you followed it from beginning to end, is it follows that narrative to a T. Denial, denial, denial. I think if you were going to do one of those sort of classic, say, Google searches, and you want to type in and find the most frequently used words in this speech, which words come up and recur most often? Up there, number one would almost definitely be Al-Qaeda. I wish I actually had counted.
And that's deliberate, isn't it?
Deliberate, because that has been top of the agenda from the start, that this entire, what the West sees as a legitimate rebel movement representing the aspirations of people who have been repressed for 4 decades of rule by a man who calls himself the Guide, but is in fact a dictator, that to Gaddafi, in his eyes, these are nothing more than terrorists, extremists being motivated by Al-Qaeda, that the terrorist organization is basically imposing its agenda on Libya. I think other words that you would hear recurring, cropping up again and again: distortion, lies, the word terrorists, this notion that what is being said about Libya, said that is by the outside world, i.e. people like us, the media, 100% false. He actually used that he said it exactly like that. 100% false. Distortions of the truth, that the West is somehow being given a distorted view of what is actually happening in the ground. I think that nothing he said perhaps spoke more clearly to his sense of being disconnected, having lost touch with reality, than his estimation that at the most 150 people dying on both sides in this conflict, when in fact we've gotten reports and also viral videos circulating everywhere at thousands of dead. We just don't know the total number. So this is a man clearly in denial. You see him sitting there, literally almost almost sitting on his throne. I mean, here is a country in the midst of absolutely falling apart at the seams all around him, battling. We hear reports of very intense clashes this weekend, counterattacks on all fronts, east and west. And here he is giving a 19-minute interview to France 24 with almost this imperious serenity. It really is that image of a man disconnected.
And he seemed to also have the opinion that the African Union, for example, were on his side. Again, a disconnection with reality.
There was that interesting question about where are the African leaders? He doesn't seem to understand or at least fathom the extent to which that he is being, if not ignored, entirely abandoned. There was the question about the dissidents who are leaving your side, Colonel, your own people. And he says, oh, those people sitting out there in those embassies, they're obviously being told the wrong things. The fact they're not in Libya sitting alongside him, they're not getting the truth. They're getting a distorted picture. Their defections are rooted in all of the wrong reasons. And so basically he does not accept or believe anything that is being said or circulated about the war that doesn't completely conform with his vision of things, which are all is calm in Libya and these terrorists will be brought to heel.
Douglas, thank you very much. That's Douglas Herbert from our International Affairs Desk. Well, earlier I spoke to our correspondent Cyril Vanier. He's in Ajdabiya, and Cyril's been in Libya for more than a week now. I asked him if Gaddafi's claims of only 150 dead had any credence with him.
By all accounts, other than Muammar Gaddafi's, that number, that death toll, is a gross misrepresentation of the reality. Diplomatic sources here and NGOs have been putting the number of deaths since the beginning of the uprising well into the several hundreds. Many have been saying above 1,000. It shouldn't be entirely surprising, however, that Mr. Gaddafi's number for the death toll is well under what it is actually perceived to be here. Since the beginning of this uprising, he has been trying to play down the extent of the violence, the number of dead. A lot of people here believe that he is demented. Those who are right are probably those who believe that he is extremely cynical. Since the beginning, he has been serving his interests and trying to play down the level of the uprising here. There is probably no way that he is in touch with the hospital directors and the morgue directors that could give him the precise numbers to estimate an accurate death toll. People here simply have stopped listening to Colonel Gaddafi because they say he is disconnected with reality. It certainly isn't the first time he has taken liberties with the truth. It probably isn't the last time he's going to do so to serve his interests.
And Cyril, watching France 24 and other media over the weekend, it seems incredibly difficult to tell who is winning individual battles. Is it any clearer this morning what areas have fallen to whichever side?
Well, along the central coast of Libya where we are, it seems that the front line is now somewhere between Ras Lanouf and Ben Jawad. Ben Jawad was the westernmost point that rebels had been able to reach on their way towards Sirte, huge pro-Gaddafi bastion. And Ben Jawad was attacked yesterday by pro-Gaddafi forces. It has now fallen, we're told, to those government forces. And rebels are protecting the towns east of that, that's to say Ras Lanouf, the site of an important petrol and oil producing plant. So it seems that after gaining ground for several days in a row, the rebels have lost a little bit of ground yesterday, and they're now facing attacks by pro-Gaddafi forces around the town of Ben Jawad.
Cyril Vanier there, who is in Ajbadaya. Much more reaction, of course, to that interview from Muammar Gaddafi during the day here on France 24. Thanks very much for watching this special edition. More news coming up shortly.